Have you ever watched someone's entire world collapse in the span of 60 seconds? Because what started as a sunny Tuesday morning with coffee and confidence ended with handcuffs and the kind of regret that tattoos itself onto your soul. This is that story. The metallic black sports car gleamed under the late morning sun, its polished surface reflecting the perfectly manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses that lined Riverside Avenue. Darius Jackson, 22 years old with dreams still fresh in his eyes, stood beside the vehicle with a disposable coffee cup warming his hands. He'd saved for 3 years to afford this machine, working double shifts at the tech startup downtown. And every time he looked at it, pride swelled in his chest like a balloon ready to lift him off the ground. He took another sip of his coffee, savoring the bitter warmth, when he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Sharp, deliberate, the kind that announce someone who believes they own whatever ground they walk on. He turned his head just in time to see her, a young woman about his age, maybe 21 or 22, with hair pulled back in a tight blonde ponytail that seemed to yank her entire face into a permanent expression of disdain. She wore a fluorescent yellow vest over a white tank top and denim shorts, and clipped to that vest was a laminated badge that read Homeowners Association, Community Patrol. Without introduction, without even a greeting that might acknowledge his humanity, she walked straight to his car. Her sneakers, bright white and spotless, made squeaking sounds as she placed one foot on the front bumper, then hoisted herself up onto the hood. The metal groaned slightly under her weight, and Darius felt his stomach drop. "Hey, you can't just—" he started, but his words were cut off by her heel, driving directly into his abdomen. The kick knocked the wind from his lungs and sent him stumbling backward, the coffee cup flying from his hand and splashing across the pristine sidewalk. Pain bloomed across his midsection, sharp and breathtaking. "You're kind," she said, her voice carrying that particular blend of sweetness and venom that only comes from someone who's never faced real consequences. "Lowers the property value of this street. You understand what I'm saying?" Darius clutched his stomach, trying to catch his breath, trying to process what had just happened. His kind. The words hung in the air like smoke, their meaning clear, even as they pretended to be about something else. Through watering eyes, he looked around the cul-de-sac. Windows lined every house, and behind several of them, he could see shadows, shapes of people who had definitely witnessed what just occurred. Mrs. Patterson at number 14, who always smiled when he drove past. Now her curtain dropped back into place. Mr. Williamson, 2 doors down, who'd been hosing down his driveway, turned away entirely, suddenly fascinated by a spot on his garage door. The couple at the corner house, the ones with the twin toddlers, pulled their children inside and shut the door with a finality that echoed across the street. No one was coming to help. No one was even pretending they hadn't seen. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was an active participant in what was happening to him, a chorus of approval for the girl still perched on his car, like some nightmare version of a hood ornament. She laughed then, and it wasn't the kind of laughter you hear at parties or when friends share jokes. This was something colder, something that understood exactly what power it held in this moment. She swung her legs casually, her heels clicking against the paint that Darius had just waxed 2 days ago, leaving small scuff marks that would require professional buffing to remove. "I'm giving you a warning," she continued, pulling a clipboard from somewhere behind her back. The papers clipped to it were covered in handwriting so messy it looked like a child's scribbles, random notes that couldn't possibly be official anything. "This is your first and only notice. Vehicles of this decalibur attract the wrong element to our community. We've discussed it at length, and the consensus is clear." Darius finally managed to straighten up, though his stomach still throbbed with each breath. The consensus, he managed to say, his voice rough. Who exactly had this discussion? The people who actually belong here, she replied, not even looking at him directly. She was examining her nails now, as if he'd already ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Look around you. Notice anything? These are family homes, respectable families, not places for people who... She gestured vaguely at him, her meaning crystalline, who obviously acquired their toys through questionable means. The accusation hit harder than her kick had. She was looking at his skin color, at his age, at his car, and creating a story in her head about drug dealing or theft or whatever racist narrative made sense to her. Never mind that he'd graduated top of his class in computer engineering. Never mind that he worked legitimate 60-hour weeks. Never mind that he'd never done anything illegal in his entire life, beyond maybe jaywalking once. None of that mattered to her, because she'd already decided who he was the moment she saw him. "You don't know anything about me," Darius said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were pointless. She didn't want to know anything about him. She wanted him gone. "I know everything I need to know," she replied, hopping down from the hood and landing with a small bounce that made her ponytail swing. She reached out and ran her finger along the car's surface, then held it up as if checking for dust. People like you, with cars like this, in neighborhoods like ours, it never ends well. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sell this ridiculous vehicle, pack up whatever apartment or rental you're squatting in, and find somewhere more suitable, somewhere that matches your station. Station. The word dripped with implications. Your station, your place. Know your place. The subtext wasn't even sub anymore, it was just text. Darius felt something crack inside him, not breaking entirely but fracturing. It was the part of him that still believed in fairness, in the idea that if you worked hard and played by the rules, you'd be treated with basic human respect. That part was crumbling, and in its place, something harder was forming. "And if I don't?" he asked, though he wasn't sure why he was even engaging anymore. The girl smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. "Then I come back tomorrow, and the day after, and I make your life here so unbearable that you'll beg to leave. Trust me, sweetheart, I'm very good at getting people to relocate." She circled him like a predator that had already tasted blood and found it satisfying. Her fake badge caught the sunlight, that cheap laminated piece of plastic that she wore like a crown. Later, he would learn that she'd made it herself, that there was no HOA patrol in this neighborhood, that she'd appointed herself guardian of property values based on nothing but her own prejudices. But in this moment, with his stomach still aching and his neighbors still hiding behind their curtains, it didn't matter whether her authority was real or imagined. She had what mattered, the silent consent of everyone watching. "Pathetic," she hissed, stepping close enough that he could smell her perfume, something flowery and expensive. "Look at you." Speechless, powerless. This is what happens when people try to climb into spaces they don't belong. Society has an immune system, and I'm part of it. I keep out the infections. The dehumanization was complete. He wasn't a person anymore, not to her. He was an infection, a disease, something to be expunged from the healthy body of the neighborhood. And the neighborhood wasn't disagreeing with her diagnosis. Darius bent slightly, still pressing his palm against his stomach where a bruise was definitely forming. His McLaren sat behind the girl, suddenly looking less like a symbol of his achievements and more like a target painted on his back. How had pride transformed into liability so quickly? How had success become evidence of criminality? The girl climbed back onto the hood, this time settling in like she might stay there all day. She crossed her arms, her sneakers leaving more marks on the paint, each scuff mark another small theft of the dignity he'd thought this purchase would bring him. "Face it," she said, her voice almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. You'll never be one of us. You can buy all the expensive cars you want, wear all the right clothes, move into all the nice neighborhoods, but people like us, we see right through it. You're playing dress up in a world that will never accept the costume. For just a moment, just a heartbeat, Darius almost believed her, almost let the weight of those words, combined with the weight of every silent window, push him down into despair. Almost accepted that maybe she was right, maybe he was foolish to think he could ever be more than what people like her decided he was allowed to be. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out with trembling hands, saw the name on the screen, and something inside him shifted. The fracture that had started to form sealed itself, reinforced by steel. He looked up at the girl on his hood, really looked at her, and saw not a powerful enforcer but a foolish child playing with matches next to a gasoline tank. "You think I'm alone here," he said, his voice suddenly steady despite the pain still radiating through his torso. "You think I'm just some random person you can terrorize because no one's going to protect me?" Her smirk wavered just slightly. "I think you should stop talking and start packing." "You just made," Darius continued, straightening to his full height, "the biggest mistake of your entire life." "Is that a threat?" She tried to sound amused, but there was an edge of uncertainty creeping into her voice. "It's a fact." The sound reached them before the vehicles became visible. 3 engines, powerful and synchronized, growing louder as they approached from the main road. The girl's eyes flicked toward the entrance of the cul-de-sac, her confidence beginning to drain like water from a cracked glass. 3 black SUVs rolled into view, moving with the kind of precision that spoke of professional drivers and serious intent. They weren't speeding, weren't aggressive, but there was something in their coordination that made them feel inevitable, like a tide you couldn't fight even if you wanted to. They formed a semicircle around Darius's McLaren, blocking any potential exits, and then stopped in perfect unison. The engines cut off simultaneously. For a moment, there was complete silence. Even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping. Then the doors opened. Men in dark suits emerged from each vehicle, 6 in total, their movements economical and purposeful. They wore sunglasses despite the clouds that had started to gather overhead, and their faces showed no expression whatsoever. They weren't here to negotiate or discuss. They were here to handle a situation. The girl scrambled off the hood of the car, finally, her earlier confidence evaporating like morning dew. Who are these people?" "Security," Darius said simply. "My father's security." From the lead SUV, the rear door opened and a man stepped out. He was in his early 50s, tall and imposing, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. His presence changed the atmosphere immediately, like how the air pressure drops before a storm. He walked forward slowly, his eyes taking in the scene with the kind of calm assessment that comes from years of making decisions that affect thousands of people. "Son," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Are you all right?" "She kicked me," Darius replied, surprised at how young his own voice suddenly sounded. "In the stomach. And she's been threatening me, saying I have to leave the neighborhood." The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He turned his attention to the girl, who had backed up against a nearby hedge, her earlier bravado completely gone. "What's your name?" I don't have to tell you anything," she stammered, but her voice shook. "I'm with the HOA. I have authority here." One of the security team members stepped forward and spoke quietly to Darius's father, showing him something on a tablet. The man nodded, then looked back at the girl. "There is no HOA patrol in this neighborhood," he said. "This community doesn't even have an active homeowners association at the moment. That badge you're wearing is fake, which means you've been impersonating an official and using that false authority to assault and threaten my son." "I didn't assault anyone. I barely touched him. You kicked him hard enough to leave a bruise. There are witnesses." He gestured to the houses around them, where curtains were now definitely pulled back, neighbors no longer hiding, but watching intently as the power dynamic shifted completely. These people saw everything. Some of them are already recording. It was true. Phones had appeared in windows, people documenting what was unfolding now, that it was clear which side held the real power. "Somebody call the real police," Darius's father said calmly. One of his security team was already on the phone, speaking in low tones. The girl's face had gone pale. "Wait, this is just a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. You thought you could terrorize a young man because of how he looks," Darius's father interrupted, his voice still calm but now edged with steel. "You thought you could sit on his property, assault him, and threaten him because you assumed he had no one to protect him. You assumed he was powerless. I didn't mean, you meant exactly what you said, and now you'll face exactly what you deserve." Within minutes, 2 police cruisers arrived, their lights flashing but sirens off. Officers stepped out, and Darius's father approached them calmly, his security team providing documentation, photos, witness statements that had been gathered with remarkable efficiency. The girl tried to explain, tried to justify, tried to make it sound reasonable, but every word only dug her deeper. One officer took photos of the scuff marks on the MCLAREN's hood. Another documented the bruise forming on Darius's stomach. A third spoke with neighbors who, now that consequences were finally arriving for the right person, were suddenly willing to come forward with statements about how they'd seen everything, how they'd known it was wrong but hadn't known what to do. The handcuffs clicked around the girl's wrists with a sound that seemed to echo across the entire street. She was still trying to talk, still trying to explain that she'd been protecting property values, that she'd had good intentions, that this wasn't fair. "Assault and battery," one officer said as he read her rights. "Impersonating an official, criminal trespass and property damage. You'll be formally charged at the station." As they walked her toward the cruiser, she looked back at Darius one more time. Her expression had transformed completely, from smug superiority to desperate confusion, as if she genuinely couldn't understand how the world had flipped so thoroughly in the span of 15 minutes. Darius watched her being placed in the back of the police car, watched the vehicle pull away with her inside, and felt something complex moving through him. Not quite satisfaction, not quite relief. Maybe it was just exhaustion, the crash that comes after adrenaline fades. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "You should have called me immediately. I thought I could handle it myself. You shouldn't have to handle things like this at all. But until the world changes, you call me. You call me every single time." "Understood." Darius nodded, feeling suddenly very young despite being 22 years old and financially independent. Some things money and success couldn't shield you from. Some battles you couldn't fight alone, no matter how capable you were. The security team began to disperse, returning to their vehicles. The neighbors slowly drifted away from their windows. The show over, the brief disruption to their Tuesday morning concluded. Everything would return to normal, except it wouldn't, not really, because now everyone knew. They knew what had happened. They knew who Darius's father was. They knew that silence had consequences too. One of the officers approached before leaving. "We'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. The physical evidence and witness testimonies are strong, but your account is important." "I'll be there this afternoon," Darius promised. "Good." "For what it's worth," the officer added, his voice dropping slightly, "I'm sorry this happened to you. And I'm sorry your neighbors didn't step in earlier." After everyone had left, Darius stood alone beside his car, looking at the scuff marks on the hood. They'd need professional attention, but they weren't permanent. Not everything that happened today would leave permanent marks. His father had stayed behind, dismissing his security team. Now it was just the two of them in the quiet cul-de-sac. the morning sun higher in the sky, the street looking deceptively peaceful. "You know this won't be the last time," his father said gently. "Success doesn't protect you from this. Sometimes it makes you more of a target." "I know," Darius replied, "but I'm not leaving. I'm not selling my car. I'm not going to shrink myself just because it makes other people comfortable." His father smiled, and there was pride in it, but also sadness. "Good. But remember, courage isn't the same as recklessness. There's no shame in asking for help." They stood together for a moment longer, father and son, successful men who still had to navigate a world that sometimes saw them as threats simply for existing in spaces others thought they shouldn't occupy. Eventually his father left, and Darius was alone with his thoughts and his McLaren and the knowledge that justice, when it came, wasn't always loud or immediate. Sometimes it arrived in black SUVs driven by professionals who understood that power wasn't just about money or position, but about being willing to stand up when it mattered. He picked up his crushed coffee cup from the sidewalk and threw it away, then got in his car and sat in the driver's seat, not going anywhere, just existing in this space he'd earned. The seat smelled like leather and possibility. The engine, when he started it, purred with barely contained power. The world hadn't changed, but maybe, just for today, justice had shown up when it was needed most. And maybe that was enough to keep going, to keep pushing forward, to keep existing loudly in spaces designed to keep you quiet.